Hello everybody, it's Kara from Wild Book Garden, and today I'm here with part 2 of my February wrap-up. This is actually going to be part 2 or 3 because, as I said in my first video, I read 28 books in the month of February, so I wanted to split this up into 3 parts. I will link part 1 down below, as well as content warnings, videos, links, etc. that I mention, and let's just get right into it. So, the next book I read was On Juneteenth by Annette Gordon-Reed, and I listened to this on audiobook, which I had heard was a really good experience, and I'm glad I did. I really enjoyed the audio, which was narrated by Karen Chilton. And this is a very short nonfiction book that is about the holiday Juneteenth, like what it commemorates, why it's important. So Juneteenth's anniversary date is June 19th, 1865, and it celebrates the actual freedom of enslaved people in Texas because they had been kept under slavery despite the fact that the Emancipation Proclamation had freed them. So this kind of marks their like actual beginning of freedom in practice, rather than just on paper. And yeah, this book talks about the history and importance of the Juneteenth holiday, but it also talks about Texas history and like specifically the history of African Americans or Black people in Texas. And it also uses that as kind of a microcosm for the history of Black people in the United States in general. And I thought this was really, really well done. I learned a lot from it. Like I knew about Juneteenth and I knew about some of the history, like with like the reason that Texans wanted Texas to be its own country rather than being taken over by Mexico or owned by Mexico is because they wanted to keep slavery and Mexico was very anti-slavery. So like I knew some about that, but I didn't know nearly as much as this book talks about, so I learned a lot from that. I had also heard a little bit about the Alamo history and like the way that that has been kind of mythologized in very specific ways, but again, I learned a lot more from this book, and I really liked the writing style as well. I think Annette Gordon-Reed does a really great job of writing in a really approachable and engaging way while also having a lot of facts and history, obviously. And like I said, I think this book just really works well as a specific history, but also as a wider history and like showing the way that these specific instances in Texas can be like are reflective of like American history as a whole. And another big element of this book is caring about imperfect places and like how commenting on the problems of a place or something that you love it doesn't mean you don't love it. In fact, it can actually be a sign that you love it. And there was a quote that I really loved that I'm going to read. "Love does not require taking an uncritical stance toward the object of one's affections. In truth, it often requires the opposite. We can't be of real service to the hopes we have for places, and people, ourselves included, without a clear-eyed assessment of their and our strengths and weaknesses." Like you can see like all throughout this book that Annette Gordon-Reed really, really loves Texas and she loves where she's from, and like it just like that shines through really well in this book, while also that element of because I love this place I have to be honest about it. And yeah, I just really, really enjoyed this and I gave On Juneteenth 5 stars. Next, I finished a picture book, and that was Crowned with Glory, written by Dorina Williamson, illustrated by Shailene Rodney, and this is a book that is about celebrating like Black hair, specifically for young girls, and it was just really, really lovely. I thought this was wonderfully done. Like the attention to detail is just beautiful. Like the way all of these different kinds of styles are shown is just really, really gorgeous. I loved it. I thought the illustrations were beautiful. I think it did a really wonderful job of showing how like things like celebrating the beauty of Black girls and Black hair is important in itself, and but it also connects to like the things that they can accomplish and achieve in the world, and like supporting that as well. So I just thought this was really wonderfully done, and I gave Crowned with Glory 5 stars. Next, I finished Identity by Camille Peters. This is a fairy tale retelling. It is a book in the Kingdom Chronicles series, but like you can tell that there were characters that you had met earlier in different books, but you can definitely read these as standalones and still understand what's going on, because this is the only book in the series I've read. And this is another Goose Girl retelling where we follow the maid character because, again, that's just something I'm very into. I find that very interesting. And in this book, her name is Anwen, and she's actually pressured into taking the place of the princess, and she really doesn't want to do this. Anwen she doesn't want to like lose her own identity, and she also doesn't want to be in the position of getting caught doing this because some terrible things could happen to her, but she gets forced to do it anyway because of this magic that the princess uses. And then she ends up having to go through with the marriage to this prince named Liam, that the princess Lavina was supposed to be. So Anwen is now known as Lavina. That's who everyone thinks she is, and she now has to marry this person who Liam and Lavina actually hate each other and have been like fighting with each other for years. So now Anwen is going into the situation where, through no fault of her own, her husband hates her, and that's kind of where the book starts off. And I was intrigued at first, but this book ended up going really downhill for me. For one thing, I think it was much too long and much too repetitive. like just we would have like the same sequence of emotions like over and over, because of course Anwen and Liam start getting to know each other better, and eventually they start warming up to each other. I say eventually, like actually there's a part at the beginning where they're not, and then from that point on it's pretty much a romance. Like their romance already starts, so it was actually a little quick. But it's like the same series of things would happen over and over, where like Anwen would look at him and she'd get all fluttery, and then she would think about how she's gonna get caught, or she's not who he thinks she is, and she'd be like despairing, and then she'd worry that she was gonna get caught, and it was just like the emotions were all very understandable, but the fact that they happened over and over and over in like the same order and like the same way, it just felt like it really annoyed me. I guess I should start with the things that I did like. Like I said, I liked the premise. I think that the way that the conflict at the end of the book was handled differently, I liked that. I thought that was really interesting, and it wasn't what I expected maybe. I liked some of the side characters, especially there's somebody named Nolan who I really liked him. And I liked some of the themes and ideas about like identity and like your sense of self, and like being true to yourself and all of that. So there were some things I liked, but a lot of other things I didn't. As far as Anwen as a main character, she was fine. Like, she was very, very, very sweet, which is not a bad thing, but it kind of felt like there wasn't a lot else to her. Like, she was very sweet, and she was really into bugs, and that was it. Which, like, it's cool that we are seeing a female character with an interest that is not often, like, shown with girls, so that was cool, but I also just absolutely cannot relate. So every time she would talk about, like, how much she loved bugs, and she was so interested to go and like look at all these insects, and she's picking up different bugs, I like was not having a good time. Also, I think the way that was incorporated in the story felt very, very clunky, so there was that too. As far as Liam, I liked him sometimes, and other times he annoyed me. It was interesting because there's multiple points in the book where Anwen thinks to herself like, oh, Lavina always said he was so immature and childish, and like with the implication that that was like cruel or untrue, or that like she just didn't know him well enough. And I'm reading this and I'm like, she was right though. Like, he actually was very immature in a lot of ways. Like, some of the things he does would just drive me up the wall. Like, he like plays with, like, he makes like forts out of his like dinner plates and stuff. Like, and this, he's like an adult. He also starts reading books in the middle because that's more of an adventure, which he sounds so obnoxious when he does stuff like that. And maybe that's like personal, like a personal thing for me, but I just thought he sounded very annoying sometimes. Again, other times he was okay, but like he just had these quirks that were very annoying to me personally. And I think not just to me, I think other people would find this frustrating too. But Anwen thought they were so cute and charming. And then as far as their romance, like, I mean, I said in my Goodreads review, this book is like sweet enough to give you a toothache, and that is not a bad thing by itself. Like, I can really, really enjoy like a really sweet romance. I can really get on board with those, but this was like sweet and like, I don't know, like over the top. Like, it felt very like cheesy. This wasn't like a good sweet romance. It was just like annoying. Also, regarding the romance, I really, really didn't like how something was treated as being like a really, really wonderful selfless gesture that I think is like basic decency. This is like a very minor thing, so I'm gonna say it. I don't think it counts as a spoiler, but like near the beginning of the book, even when Anwen and Liam really don't like each other, or they're really not getting along, at the very beginning, like, Anwen is expecting him to want to sleep with her, and he says like, oh no, like we're not gonna do that until we like each other at least a little bit more or something. And it's treated as like, oh, that's so kind of him. And it's like, that's really like the bare minimum. And then elsewhere in the book, when they are starting to like each other, Anwen says no, that she doesn't want to for like reasons, which obviously any reason is okay. But she's like, even though she wants to, she says she doesn't because of something else. And the way that's treated, it's like Liam was not awful about it. Like, he wasn't rude about it. But the way it's written in the book is like Anwen feels so bad and she has to like apologize, and like I don't feel like it was made very clear that she shouldn't have needed to apologize for that, so that really irritated me. Also, at first I like just didn't care about Anwen's brother Archer. That's like kind of a somewhat significant side plot. I didn't care about him at all. But then by the end of the book, I actively disliked him because of the certain like things that he would do about his like protective big brother thing, and it was just like obnoxious. I also think we had an opportunity for a much more complex antagonist than we got. that didn't happen. So yeah, like there were some things about this that I liked, but it ended up being a real disappointment for me, and I gave Identity 2.75 stars. Next, I read Go Back to Where You Came From and Other Helpful Recommendations on How to Become American by Wajahat Ali. And this is a memoir that is like kind of written as the title implies. It's like framed as like a series of suggestions and steps on how to be like American and become accepted as an American, which is written from Wajahat Ali's perspective as a child of South Asian immigrants. He's also Muslim, and he talks about that a lot. And I loved this book so much. Like, this is probably one of my favorite memoirs. Like, I thought this was fantastic. First off, Wajahat Ali is just hysterically funny. Like, his style of humor just really works for me. Like, there were multiple times where I literally laughed out loud reading this book, and you guys know that's very rare. That doesn't happen very much, but I thought he was so funny. And I think the way that he balances the humor with the really difficult things that like he is talking about and that he went through. Like, I followed him online, I've read some of his online stuff before, but I didn't know that much about him, so I had like no idea some of the things that he and his family had gone through. And then also just the topics he's speaking about in general are very difficult, and the way that he balanced those with the humor I just think was really impressive. I think he's also just a really good writer. He's just very engaging and thoughtful, and just like it's a real pleasure to read his writing. I think the way he talks about these issues and topics is just so well done. This is another book that I think does a great job of talking about personal experiences and then using those to talk about like wider systemic issues. Like, he talks about like racism and xenophobia and Islamophobia, like both, like all of those things in like personal examples, but also like the wider story of America. And then speaking of things I didn't realize about him, I did not know that he has OCD. And I've mentioned this a few times on my channel, but I don't talk about it a lot, but I also have OCD, and I don't read about it very much for specific reasons, but so like I was not expecting that element to be in this book, but the way like it's a very small element of the book in a way, but the way he talks about it with such like compassion and care, like it like made me cry. Like, I was not expecting to cry for that reason while reading this book, and that was just something I really appreciated. Like, there were several things like that where even though we are very different people, we have very different life experiences, I could really see part of my life reflected in this book. And again, OCD was one of the big examples for that. Like, that just really meant a lot to me to see that and to see it written about that way. This was also a really incredibly cathartic book. Like, I think the way that he balanced all these really intense, like emotional like topics and experiences was just really well done. Like, it's like some parts of it were rough to read, but like you still like, yeah, cathartic is really the best word I have for it. This is also one of those books that balances like serious feelings with a feeling of hope, and that there is still a chance. We do have hope to do better and to treat each other better. Yeah, like this is just a really incredible book. I mean, the way that he ends it, where he talks about the Emma Lazarus poem that is on the Statue of Liberty, like throughout the book he talks about like the many horrible things that America has done and that other places have done, and yet at the end he's like, but I still care. he's like as stupid as it makes me feel sometimes, I still have hope that we can do better. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but and like the way he finishes with that poem I just think was a perfect choice. Like, he basically is like, what if we actually tried to live up to that promise? I just thought this was amazing. I feel like I'm getting less and less coherent as I go on, but I would highly recommend this as a nonfiction book, as a memoir. Just a really incredible book, and I gave Go Back to Where You Came From 5 stars. Next, I finished another picture book, and that was Our California by Pam Munoz Ryan, illustrated by Rafael Lopez. I think when I looked at this book, I think maybe it's a rewrite, like a new edition of a previous picture book. So I don't know if it used to be by a different author and then Pam Munoz Ryan rewrote it or what. But this is a book about California. It talks about some of the different locations, different landmarks, like the different regions, and obviously like I live in California, for those of you who don't know. And I thought this was really lovely. Like, it was just like, obviously it was really cool to see the place that I live celebrated in such a way. I loved seeing the variety here. That was really cool, because I think there's like a misconception that like California is basically all like beaches, and that is very much not the case. So I really liked seeing that. I loved the illustration style. Like, it is so vibrant and beautiful. I'll insert some pictures of that, but I really loved that as well. I just, yeah, really liked this. Would definitely recommend if you are from California or if you're interested in this. My one big critique is I really wish there had been more of a focus on the different Native American groups that are indigenous to California, because that's a huge part of our history and present, and I really didn't like the way that was left out. Like at the very back of the book, there is some like, there's a lot more like information about the different places it talks about, and in that section it talks a lot more about Native Americans, which I appreciate, but I wish that had been present throughout the actual like picture book part. So that was my only critique, but I really liked this. I thought the back gave some good information, and I gave Our California 4 stars. Next, I finished another nonfiction book. You can see there was a lot of nonfiction this month, and a lot of really, really amazing nonfiction this month. And that was What White People Can Do Next, From Allyship to Coalition by Emma Dabiri. Emma Dabiri wrote Twisted, or Don't Touch My Hair, which was fantastic. I read that last year. And this is her newer book, which is relatively new. I think it was just published last year. And I thought this was fantastic. This is really, really short. This is a very small edition, obviously, and I think this is only 150 pages. This is the UK cover, by the way. But I thought this was fantastic. Like, once again, I love the way Emma Dabiri writes. I love that she is so, like, she's so knowledgeable, and she writes in a way that fully communicates that while also being very engaging and approachable. And this book is really, I mean, kind of what it says in the title, but also kind of not, because she recognizes that it's like a very provocative title in a way. But it's funny because some of the suggestions she makes, or some of the opinions she talks about, or beliefs she talks about, are radical in a different way. So basically, she wrote this book as a response because people would ask her over and over, like, especially after the events of 2020 and the way that more people than ever before were paying attention to things like police brutality. She talks about how she got this question a lot, and how she's like, frankly, I was never very interested in answering it, because her area of interest was the Black Atlantic. So like various cultures that were not necessarily, like, she didn't like viewing everything through the lens of like enslaved Africans, or like colonialism and all of that. And so she was just like, that's not really my area of study, it's not really my area of interest. But eventually she did decide to put together kind of a response, and that's what this is. And like, the subtitle is From Allyship to Coalition, and one of the big things she talks about is that she really does not like the term ally. And I thought the reason she gave for that made a lot of sense. It's like this very kind of paternalistic feeling. And so instead she talks about coalition. And she also talks about like the way that different civil rights groups in the past, like their big thing, the reason they were able to accomplish a lot was coalition. So like was groups who you would not necessarily think of working together, like finding common ground. And there's some of the stuff she talks about where it's like, I wonder if that would still happen in a similar situation today. Like, I just don't know if it would, but still, the way she talks about it, I was like, yeah, like, I didn't think about, like, I think she's right, like, I don't think about that. And just in general, like, this was such a thought-provoking book. I feel like I'm doing a really bad job of talking about how good it is, or how effective it was, how much it made me think. She also talks about like language a lot, and the way that certain like language conventions, while they may have good intentions, they can actually serve to separate people. Like, one of the things that she talks a lot about throughout this whole book is the idea that, like, the way she sees like this current kind of trend almost of activism is that it can sometimes function in ways that actually enforce the concept of race, which is, a lot of people I think at this point know, race is biologically meaningless. Like, it's something that humans made up. And so the way that Emma Dabiri talks about it is like, sometimes the way that we approach these issues, she's not saying like, I don't see color is the way to go here, but what she's saying is that like, sometimes the way that we can approach these different terms or actions or goals, even though it is ostensibly about anti-racism, it can actually enforce this like completely made up idea that races do exist, which I just thought was really, really interesting. Another thing that really surprised me is that she takes issue with one of the common like arguments for I guess for like equality or equity, which is basically that the privileged have to sacrifice something in order to raise up other people. Like, she basically was saying how like we should be honest about the fact that like it is in your best interest. Like, she gives like multiple examples of how, like, for example, basically what she thinks is more effective and more honest and more likely to work is communicating to people that even if you are not the one that is most affected by some of these things, like by police brutality, for instance, it is in everyone's best interest to make that not a problem anymore. So she's pretty much saying that in some cases we shouldn't appeal to people's selflessness and we should instead appeal to their self-interest, which I just thought was really interesting. So as with several of these books, I feel like I'm not doing a very good job of communicating why this is fantastic, but it definitely gave me so much to think about. Again, some of these perspectives are things that I hadn't really thought of in that way before, so I really got a lot out of this. And again, like some of the things she said, it's like, I don't know quite how I feel about this, like, I don't know, like, but it definitely made me consider these like different possibilities that I hadn't thought of before, which is like, you know, one of the goals, I think. Anyway, fantastic. I gave What White People Can Do Next 5 stars. Next, I finished another really incredible nonfiction book, and that is Just Mercy, A Story of Justice and Redemption by Bryan Stevenson. This was a present from my wonderful friend Katie from A Sea of Tomes, and I'm so grateful because this is one of those books I've been meaning to get to, but it was always just on that like, someday I'll read it list, and now I finally read it, and it was just as incredible as everyone says. Yeah, again, another nonfiction favorite. This was so good. So this is the story of Bryan Stevenson, who was a young lawyer, or training to be a lawyer, and at the beginning of the book, he talks about how he wasn't even sure at this point if he did want to study law, but he ends up doing an internship that involved working with some people on death row, and that is what really that inspired him to basically make this his life's work. He started the Equal Justice Initiative, which is a group headquartered in Alabama, where they defend people on death row, and like they work to end the death penalty. And yeah, like this is a really incredible book. I admire Bryan Stevenson as a person so much. He just seems like a really incredible person, and he's a very like humble person. Like the whole tone of the book is kind of like, I'm just a regular guy and these are the things I did and this is important to me, and it's like, just he's incredible. Yeah, so I got a lot out of this. I think as a writer he's really good. Like the content of the book is fantastic, but I think the way he tells it as a story is also really impressive. Like he tells it from his perspective and how he got involved with his work and various cases that they took on, and some of it is incredibly difficult to read, for very good reason, because I think it's important that he does include these things. And he talks about defending people on death row. He talks about like the number of, like they're not able to save everybody. And the way he tells the story is he would kind of alternate chapters. Like the case he spends the most time on the book is Walter McMillian, and then between that he would have chapters that touched on other cases and other specific issues in the prison system, like the treatment of mental health patients and how they're really criminalized, the prison industrial complex in general, like basically the fact that prisons are now a business in the United States and how disgusting that is. He talks about like sexual abuse in prisons. He talks about like kids who end up in these systems. Like there's a lot of different factors that he covers, and the way he works that into the book feels so natural because he would talk about cases and that would lead him to talk about these other issues. This is yet another book that I think does a really great job of focusing on these personal stories and then connecting that to wider pictures, like the wider issues that are going on. I think it's very hard to come up with books that like everybody should read, but this is one of them. I really do think that whatever your feelings are on capital punishment and the death penalty, I think you could get something out of this book. Because I still got so much out of this book, even as somebody who was already against the death penalty before I picked this book up. I still feel like I learned so much. I feel like it was such a valuable experience. One of the things that really struck me is the way that throughout the book, when he talked about life sentences, he would frame it as this person was sentenced to die in prison. And that's true. Like that's what life in prison means. Like, yes, it's better than capital punishment, but like the way that he just frames that as being like much more honestly as being like this person, like especially when you talk about like kids who are in the wrong place at the wrong time, and it's like you are telling this 14-year-old child that they are going to die in prison, that that is the best they can ever hope to be. So anyway, this was an incredibly important book. I'm so glad I read it. I really do recommend this to every single person. I think everybody should read this and would get something out of it. Again, even if you believe the death penalty is just, I think you should still care about, for example, seeing it applied correctly. Like the sheer number of cases of like people who have been executed and then are exonerated later is like despicable. So anyway, this was really, really incredible. I'm so glad I finally read it, and I gave Just Mercy 5 stars. Next, I finished Cuckoo Song by Frances Harding. This was a reread, and this was as part of mine and Hannah's Frances Harding read-along. I will link that live show down below. We are currently on our planned hiatus right now, so we're not currently reading a book for the read-along, but this was our most recent one, and this is a mostly historical fiction book, but there is like a fantasy element. So it is historical fantasy, and we are following our main character, who is a girl named Triss, who wakes up after this accident where she fell into the lake, and she's really, really scared because her memory isn't working right. She doesn't remember what happened to her. Her family is treating her differently. Like, her younger sister seems to hate her, and she doesn't know why. And there's just this really, like, this building sense of unease throughout the book, as Triss tries to figure out what happened to her and what's going on. This book is also set very soon after the Great War, and I think that setting and the way that this book used that to talk about things like grief was just so impressive. Yeah, I loved this book, you know, unsurprising because I love Frances Harding, but this was the first time rereading this book, and for one thing, I think it lends itself really well to a reread. I just love Triss as a main character so much. I love a lot of these characters so much. Like, you'll see if you watch our live show that Hannah and I were basically just like having feelings about them the whole time, because Triss, she's so brave and good, and she doesn't think she's good, but she is. And I also think I really like how, like, there's a few of Frances Harding's heroines that are like this, where like she has kind of a nasty streak and she has to work so hard to fight against that, and because of this she's convinced that she's not a good person, but like she is. I also really like the way the fantasy elements are used. Like I said, I think the historical aspect was really interesting. I love the themes about things like grief and like identity, and just, yeah, I mean, the themes in Frances Harding's books are always done beautifully. I really loved some of the supporting characters. There's like a trope in this book that I really love that I can't say what it is because of spoiler reasons, but I love it. I also feel like the end was really, really satisfying. It was also really fun and interesting to reread this book because this is the first time I've reread it. I think all of her books lend themselves really well to rereading, but I think especially with this one, there are certain things that rereading it gives you a really different perspective on. So I thought this was fantastic, and I gave Cuckoo Song 5 stars. Then, as you've probably been noticing, I was reading quite a few heavy books in the month of February, so I decided to read something lighter, and that was Tea and Sympathetic Magic by Tansy Rayner Roberts. I just got this recently for Christmas, and this is a very, very short novella. It's like 70 pages or something, so super, super short, and I absolutely loved this. This is I guess it's like not even really a historical fantasy. I don't know. It's a fantasy that is set in this place called the Teacup Isles, which in some ways seem very, very loosely informed by like England. I forget, I don't know what time period it would be, but like it is vaguely historical flavored, but not very much. And we're following our main character, Nemazine, who I apologize if I say her name wrong because I have a really difficult time with that name. And she also goes by Neme, which I also have a hard time saying. At the beginning of the story, she is one of the guests who are staying for like a house party, some kind of event, at the Duke of Storm's house, and every eligible young lady is desperate to marry him, it seems. Neme is not, however, and not in like a, oh, she doesn't want to marry him, but she'll like him more later. Like, she genuinely is like, no, not interested, not for me. Also, we're cousins and I'm not okay with that. Because like in this world, that does still sometimes happen, but it's not as common, and Neme thinks it's weird. So she's like, no, not for me. And while she's there, she ends up getting to know these ladies a lot better, maybe realizing that she has misjudged some of them. She also ends up spending a lot of time with the Duke's like spellcracker, because his job is basically to prevent these ladies from using magic charms on the Duke to try and like help him, like nudge him along, you know, to get married to them. And so Neme ends up kind of working with him, and then there is an apparent kidnapping that happens that throws everything into an uproar. And yeah, I probably shouldn't say too much more about the plot because it's so short, but like I said, I absolutely loved this. This is just like a really perfect book for me in a lot of ways because I liked this particular kind of historical fantasy. I loved Neme as a character. I loved the female friendships and these ideas about like realizing maybe you've misjudged other girls as being frivolous. Like, that's something I always love. I really loved the romance subplot. I really liked that for overall this is a really like light and kind of fun kind of story, but I still really liked how the use of magic is used to comment on gender and like women's roles in this society. Like, for example, there's a certain kind of magic like invitation that the ladies of the house, I think only they can give it, or it's traditional that they're the ones who do it, and it's used through like it basically it uses the like assumption that women are better at like correspondence and writing letters and, you know, that kind of thing, as like an actual magical power that they have. So even though it's like women are not allowed to use different other kinds of magic, the entire like magical network depends on these ladies sending each other invitations and things, which I just thought was so cool. So yeah, writing, humor, characters, romance, like I just loved everything about this. I'm very excited to read the other novellas in this series. I do wish it was a little longer, that we had more resolution for like a certain thing, but I didn't even mind that much because I just had a blast reading this. And I give Tea and Sympathetic Magic 5 stars. And finally, the last book I'm going to talk about in this part of the wrap up is Hunted by Megan Spooner. This was another reread. I don't know if this video has already gone up, but I have these books, like plans for books that I want to reread this year, and this is one of them. I reread a different standalone book by Megan Spooner last year, which was Sherwood, which I obviously love. I have a whole review on it. It's one of my favorite books. And this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. We're following our main character Yiva, and her father is in trade. And at the beginning of the story, this is like how the traditional Beauty and the Beast story goes. Something happens where they lose their fortune, so they end up having to move to their hunting cabin in the woods. They have to like sell all their other things. And Yiva's actually not that disappointed because she's always really loved this cabin. She loves being outside. She loves hunting. She loves this like she basically feels constrained in the expectations of like a society lady in town. So she's actually really happy with this, but she feels bad for her family. And her father ends up going after this like beast that he says is in the woods. And when he doesn't come back, Yiva decides that she's gonna try and follow him or find him. And then things kind of happen from there. Yeah, I really liked this once again. It's very interesting reading this after reading Sherwood, because the first time I read this book, Sherwood had not been published yet. And it's very interesting to see like hints of things that also are present in Sherwood, but that I love in that book even more. Like it just, I don't know, like the commentary, like the feminism, for example, and the like commentary on this like not like other girls trope. It's like, I think the writing for that is even stronger in Sherwood, but you can even see that in Hunted, which I really liked. I also really love how close Yiva is with her sisters. Like in a lot of retellings and in the original, you know, there's like this rivalry between them. I think in the original there is, but here that's not the case, and I really appreciated that. I like the way that this retelling, it's got this like blend of like kind of Russian folklore in this as well, which I really liked. I also really love Megan Spooner's writing and the way that she creates atmosphere. I found Yiva a really interesting main character, and I think she is one of the only like successful protagonists, for me at least, that have this kind of like this particular kind of restlessness. Like I feel like Catherine Arden tries to do it in the Winter Night Chronicles and she does it really badly. I don't know why I said Chronicles. I think it's just Winter Night Trilogy. But yeah, this kind of generic, like, I want to be free and travel and be free. And it's like, well, why? And it's like, free. And it's like, well, what do you want to do? Freedom. Like, it seems very like basic, because I don't feel like a lot of times authors give us any reason or any motivation for what these characters specifically want to do. It's like, if they're not happy being like put into this box of what is expected of women, I totally understand that, but I want to see what they do actually want to do. I want to like understand why they want, like what they want that's more, you know? And I feel like Yiva does that. Like her character is such a good example of that, because she doesn't really know what she wants, and it's really frustrating to her because she knows that she is restless and unhappy, and she feels bad for it because she doesn't know what she wants. Like she thinks she does, and she keeps like I don't know, she keeps like thinking that she's getting closer. She keeps thinking that if she does something, if she goes somewhere, if she succeeds in this goal, that she'll find what she wants and she'll be content finally. And that's not exactly what happens, and it hurts to see that, but I think it's written so well. Also, I feel like Yiva is very, like, she has a pretty strong, like, not like other girls vibe for some of this book, but that's really challenged by some things that happen near the end, which I really liked. I also think as a retelling, this book is really interesting, like the way that Megan Spooner kept some things from the original, but that she also like played with a lot of other things. I think when this book first came out, I feel like I remember people being frustrated at some of Yiva's choices, and I just want to mention that Yiva does not know she's in a Beauty and the Beast retelling. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's one of those books where it's like, yes, there's a couple things where it's like, we obviously know what's going on, but she didn't, and I feel like that was understandable. Yeah, so I'm really glad I reread this. This was really interesting. My main complaint is I wish that the relationship had been developed a little more, or that we had spent more time with them interacting, but overall I did really like this, and I gave Hunted 4.5 stars. I still love Sherwood more, but I think this one was really good as well. Okay everybody, so that was part 2 of my February wrap-up. Please comment down below and let me know if you have read any of these books, what you thought of them, or if you're going to pick them up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye! Not like the brazen giant of Greek fame, with conquering limbs astride from land to land, here at our sea-washed sunset gates shall stand a mighty woman with a torch, whose flame is the imprisoned lightning, and her name, Mother of Exiles. From her beacon hand glows worldwide welcome, her mild eyes command the air-bridged harbor that twin cities frame. Keep, ancient lands, your storied pomp, cries she with silent lips. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed, to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door.